If I was listening to this podcast maybe 5, 6 years ago, I'd be like, that's cool, that's interesting, but not for me.
Even as a kid, I remember thinking my only job is to get 100 or something as close as possible to it, right?
There's a lot of pressure to try to figure it out very early on.
It's so easy to dismiss something we don't understand or we don't see value in.
I want to address that head on, and because I've had to address it a couple of times.
There's no guarantee that people will want to listen to it. Anything will come of it. So every year, Dinesh, I have the opportunity to help lead a leadership workshop for international baccalaureate graduating seniors. And I really love doing that because I see so much of myself in them, right? As an overachiever, as someone who has picked a profession that requires a lot of training, I see it in them, all of the anxiety and the just the angst that it brings to not have a real clear set. They might have a goal, but it seems so far off, right? Like they've got to take these tests and then they've got to graduate and now they're picking their majors and, everything is an if and, like, well, if I get in here and then I do this and then I do that and I take these classes and if I Jenga everything just right, then I'm going to get where I want to go.
Yeah.
Does that bring back any memories for you? Like when you were first starting out?
Yeah, it totally does. And I think, now looking back, there's a lot of pressure to try to figure it out very early on. And that you've got to, if you don't somehow figure it out, you're going to spend a lot of time not figuring it out. And that's a lot of wasted time. And, there's some truth to that a little bit, because in the grand scheme of things, and I'll bring it back to the topic we're talking about, but in the grand scheme of things, the thing that matters most is not how fast you're moving towards something, it's whether you're moving towards the right thing, right?
Right.
And so I think there's a reason people feel that, and I think it is from like, hey, if I'm not moving towards the right thing, I'm going to have to undo a lot of effort and investment that I've done. But I'm not sure that is entirely the scheme that we should use, as we'll talk about today.
Yeah, I think what I want us to really encourage our listeners to think about today for themselves is, how do you perceive learning, and what kinds of learning are you really allowing in your life? And by learning, I mean just taking action towards your goals.
Yeah.
Like, for example, there's a lot of this idea of like, well, I have to be progressing towards the right thing, whatever the right thing is.
Yeah.
But importantly, I've got to choose the right thing or else the entire house of cards falls.
Right.
It's a lot of pressure to put on ourselves. And it starts so early how many times have we heard people ask little kids, what do you want to be when you grow up? They don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But they're picking things, and then when they say like firefighter, the dad and the mom are like, no, you have to be doctor, like that's just it's so much pressure.
And it is.
Yeah. We don't know how to deprogram ourselves. And importantly, I think that the real question is, how aware are we that maybe the deprogramming of that is necessary if we want to actually be happy?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of pressure, but I also think it's totally unnecessary. Because, like, I mean, I'll give you sort of a framework that I use, and I'll just use myself about this. So, you graduate high school at 18, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in today's day and world, let's say you work till you're 68, right?
Okay.
That's 50 years of your life that you've got this sort of thing to figure out for, right? And for different people it's different times, but we'll just use that 50-year number for convenience. At 18, based on, I don't know, you probably get some sense of the world at around 8. And so you've got 10 years of memories and recollections and experiences on which you're drawing to decide how you're going to spend the next 50 years, right?
Mhm.
That already starts to seem like, okay, well, why are we subjecting ourselves to this pressure to decide what we're going to do for 50 years based on 10 years of experiences, right? And then when you unpack it a little bit more, um, and let's say you choose something, right?
Mhm.
And you decide to follow a certain major, like, become an engineer like me or go into dentistry like you, another 8, 10 years might go by. And at that point, is it realistic to think that your path in life is set for the next 40 years, right?
Right.
I mean, you've only invested 10. And then let's say you work for 10 more years, you still have double that amount left. Like
Right.
you're not in the sunk cost fallacy yet where, well, it's too late to try something new. And the final point I'll make is just look at myself. I started out college at University of Florida thinking I'd be pre-med.
Mhm.
And then I did marketing as a major, I did engineering as a major, and I graduated with an engineering degree. And I don't do any engineering right now, right? And then you end up going to law school and you end up doing different things. And even with you, like you're no longer practicing dentistry.
Mhm.
And the longer that you stay in a path because you chose it already, you keep choosing something that you chose and you no longer want to choose, the more that pressure sort of becomes toxic in my mind.
Yeah. I mean, it's so interesting to me because even as a kid, I remember thinking my only job
Hmm.
is to get 100 or something as close as possible to it, right? Even in really young, like 4th grade, 5th grade.
Yeah.
It's so much so that I was so performance metric based
Hmm.
that it sucked the joy out of learning. And
Yeah.
so I kept telling myself, well, this is just until I become a doctor, right? And then I can stop going to school. And then you find out, like, wait, you want me to become a doctor and then I have to continue to learn,
Hmm.
right? I think that's the right thing to do is always encouraging your learning once you finish school. There's always new, techniques and procedures and materials and things to use when you're in dentistry. There's, same thing for medicine. Your industry is constantly evolving.
Hmm.
But I remember being a little bit, I mean, to use a phrase from Friends, indignant as a consumer,
Hmm.
because I thought that if I consumed the education to a point, I could stop learning.
Yeah.
The joy of learning had gotten sucked away.
Hmm.
And so when it was time to do like history, for example, I'd be like, man, I don't want to know history. That doesn't
Yeah.
have anything to do with me being able to administer anesthesia to somebody and then do a procedure. Right.
Well, it almost sounds like you were involved in transactional learning,
Oh, yes,
which is
absolutely.
like I'll only invest the time to learn something if I can see how it benefits me,
Hmm.
right? And it's an interesting point. And a lot of times people talk about like parents will talk about, what are you putting your kids in, and are you pushing them a certain way, or should they learn piano? And my philosophy is I'm not trying to get them information.
Right.
I'm trying to instill a philosophy of curiosity, because
Yeah.
if you're curious, you're going to have in you a sense of figuring it out,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And not sort of throw your hands up and say, well, I can't do numbers, or I'm bad with technology, or whatever it is that comes up, any challenge that comes your way. You'll say, okay, well, I know I can figure this out.
Right. The
Let me
confidence,
Yeah,
right? The confidence.
the confidence and security
Yeah.
that you have, as opposed to sort of limiting yourself and saying, well, when it comes to building furniture, for example, I'm never good with it, and not even get curious about how can you get good. No one's asking
Hmm.
you to be the best furniture builder, but I can promise you, wherever you are in furniture building, you can get better from where you are.
It's a funny example, but I think it's true in that the other lie we tell ourselves is this isn't going to benefit me,
Yeah,
right? Even if it has quote unquote nothing to do with what is in my lane of expertise,
yeah,
learning about something else, like it won't really do much for me.
yeah,
Um, And then we stay stuck, right? In this, like, if I decided to become a dentist,
Yeah.
then I've put all my eggs in this one basket. If I subscribe to the belief that, I've any learning outside of that is not going to serve me. And the reality is what I have found, is that the more I have opened myself up to learning something just for the sake of learning it,
Hmm.
it actually makes me better at the thing that I'm already an expert in,
Yeah.
right? I
Totally.
find a new way
Yep.
to relate to it, and I show up differently. Um, as opposed to where you're, to use your term, you're a little curmudgeon
Mm.
that's like, I'm only going to do this one thing.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
it's a good point, and it's something I talk a lot about. We're As human beings, I feel like we're poor forecasters, right? We're poor
Uh-huh.
predictors, and this comes from one of my mentors, Wharton Bellamy, really good friend, number one legal development trainer on the planet, I think.
Mm.
And he makes the argument that when we're presented with an opportunity, whether it's to go to dinner with someone or to take a course like you just did or to read
Mm-hmm.
a book, we do, and I'm going to step through it really slowly so people see it in real time when they're doing it. We do this calculation in our head. And the calculation goes something like this: is the perceived benefit going to outweigh the perceived effort I have to invest?
Right.
Right. And so you just did this course where you were gone for a couple of days. And
Mm-hmm.
while the course didn't cost much, like you still had to invest your time and flying and leaving your family. And a lot of people, what they would do is like, okay, well, do I see how this is going to benefit me based on what is being asked of me, whether it's
Right.
money or time? And what we end up missing, or what we end up doing, is we carry out that calculation on one metric. And usually
Mm-hmm.
it's like, well, am I going to make more money? Am I going to be more successful? Something like that. We totally ignore all the other metrics, right?
Yeah.
But the real magic, the real benefit is in 100 different metrics. And so
Mm-hmm.
going back to your course, it was a public speaking presentation course, right?
Mm-hmm.
And arguably you were there to learn public speaking.
Right.
But one of the benefits are the people that you might meet in the room,
100%.
right?
I met
And
some really cool people that I never would have met otherwise.
right, totally. Another benefit might have been the person you sat next to on the plane
Mm-hmm.
that you struck up a conversation with, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or that you found a really cool town in New Jersey that you might go vacation to, or it's just
Yeah.
whatever, right? Or you're walking by the airport and you see a book that you pick up that changes your life, right?
Mm-hmm.
All those benefits. But let me ask you this, Seema. How many times have you said, I'm going to go to a conference just to see who I meet there?
Uh, I think once, maybe twice, but
Right,
that was recent, right? Like
right.
the whole idea of this non-transactional experience
Hmm.
is new for me.
Yeah,
And it really opened my eyes to how much we cut ourselves off from just the joy of living.
right, right. Totally. And it also, keeps us stagnant when we avoid making decisions because we don't see how it benefits us linearly.
Hmm.
It keeps us stagnant because if you're like, well, I'm not trying to be a public speaker, or why would I do that? Other avenues don't open for you,
Hmm.
right? And that's why I really believe, and you know make living life a lifestyle,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
To where that you're willing to try new things and willing to taste new things. And even if someone's told you that, uh, I don't know, playing pool is an awful sport, right? Like, go try it.
Yeah.
Try to decide on your own as opposed to taking someone else's judgment, because you just don't know what you're missing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it's so easy to dismiss something we don't understand or we don't see value in,
Yeah,
um, because we haven't made the time to ask the question you're saying, which is, how might this enhance my life?
right.
How might this actually make me a better person? And we've talked a lot about detaching from the outcome,
Yeah.
in subtle ways over the course of our can you believe it? Over a year of
Yeah.
podcasting.
We've been going pretty strong.
We've had so much fun. And, you know, the podcast is a great example of why would you, you know, take time out of your already full lives
Yeah.
to do this thing that you don't know how to do.
Yeah.
There's no guarantee that people will want to listen to it or that that anything will come of it, right?
Right.
But I mean, look at all the amazing people we've had on the show. We've gotten closer in our own relationship.
Hmm.
We've learned a new skill set. It's those benefits are, you know, non-existent if you don't move forward with faith a little bit and say, is this an experience I want to have?
Absolutely.
You know, like the idea that there's really a smorgasbord of opportunities to create experiences that you want. It's a create your own experience.
Absolutely. So it totally is. And, if I was listening to this podcast maybe 5, 6 years ago, I'd be like, that's cool. That's interesting, but not for me. I've got my path set out. I know where I'm going. And, I hear your perspective, but not for me. I'm laser focused on what I'm doing. And I want to address that head on. And because I've had to address it a couple of times with some people, look, at the end of the day, if you're a professional or an entrepreneur and you're trying to do something and you're trying to be successful, you've got to remember that people interact and do business with people they enjoy.
Hmm.
And the people they enjoy are the people they take interest in. And the people they take interest in are people that are doing interesting things.
Yep.
And if you're not doing something interesting, you're significantly reducing the amount of surface area you have for someone to find you interesting, right?
Yeah.
And I think you hit it on the head. Like the joy for us in doing the podcast isn't obsessing over the listenership, like how many people are downloading, and or what is the end goal? Are we trying to sell a product? Are we trying to, you know get ad placements, or what is it? The end goal simply is that we get to have a conversation with people that we would have never crossed paths with in life,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
um and people that are in our backyard, like Philip lives, I pass by Philip's house twice a day, Monday through Friday, and now we have a friendship.
That's
And
so cool.
with Neha and Flora and K-Mac and Colby and all these wonderful guests that
Hmm.
we've had, um, would have never come about
Yeah.
without the podcast.
Yeah. Well, and importantly, the best thing that I have found is when I have listeners tell me, "Oh, I connected with that guest that you had on,
Yeah,
and I
yeah, yeah,
never would have known about them
yeah.
had I not, you know, had you not had them on your show," right? So there's always it's like a veil,
Right.
right? What we see because we're limited by our ego, our inability to because it's fear, right? We get focused on something and we think if we stay the course, then
Hmm.
we'll be safe
Right.
versus venturing out and putting ourselves in new positions or quote unquote wasting time learning a skill that doesn't seem to be relatable to what we need to do.
Yeah.
You know, and essentially there's that veil, but then beyond that, there's this entire universe that's running on its own rhythm.
Yeah.
And when we can step out of our own inhibitions, then we get to find the deeper connections, the deeper meanings, I guess, of life. And it makes us feel like, all right, like now when I go back and I do the thing in my lane, I'm doing it
Hmm.
with more joy. I'm showing up
You are.
with just so much more happiness, with a lightheartedness. It's not as stressful. And my health, actually, I feel healthier because I'm not stressing all the time. And I'm a better person because my family's like actually wanting to be around. Like there's so many different reasons why I would encourage our listeners to figure out what experiences do you want to have? Do you want to take an improv class? Because
Yeah.
taking an improv class actually makes you a better conversationalist,
Yeah.
right?
Absolutely.
Do you want to learn how to make pizza? Because you know what? If you make pizza at home, you might entertain more people and then, you know, you might meet someone new that really enjoys pizza and you might wind up meeting your new best friend.
Totally.
You know, whatever it is, I just really want to encourage our listeners to think to yourself, if you were to retire today
Yeah.
and you had all the money and all the time in the world,
Hmm.
what are the experiences you would want to have?
Yeah.
And Dinesh, you said something about being interesting.
Hmm.
And I want to clarify for our listeners, because my perception is I got what you meant, which
Hmm.
is interesting to you.
Right.
Don't be interesting. Don't do the interesting thing that you think your father-in-law will approve of,
Oh, yeah. No.
right? Like, do the things that are interesting to you,
Right.
and your love of that interest will actually show up in every aspect of life, and it'll attract other people that, and other experiences, and it'll just build and build and build. Um,
Yeah. Because you'll come
yeah.
alive. You'll
You'll
come
come
alive.
alive.
You'll come
Yeah.
alive when you're doing things that you're interested in and you're
Yeah.
learning and you're pursuing growth because, growth and personal satisfaction go hand in hand. Um,
Mhm.
and so I totally agree. And so let's give a couple of one or two or three strategies for people to do this. But before we do that, how about a huge shout out to Penny Royal Bakery? Um, she is such a great fan, and she's got this custom cookie store in Leander, Texas. And I think you know her, Seema, right?
I do know her. We actually went to college together. Can you believe
You
it?
did. Oh,
Well, I
wow.
didn't know I went to college with her
Yeah.
until yeah.
So if you're in Leander, and this is not sponsored by the Penny Royal Bakery, but if you are in Leander and you like cookies like me and you believe a cookie is kindness, a cookie is connection, a cookie shows you care, go check out Penny Royal Bakery. And I know she connected with Neha over the Mendi cones
Mhm.
on making Mendi and then using similar cones for icing and decoration on cookies.
Yeah,
So
isn't
really
that
cool.
cool?
Yeah,
It's
really cool to see the
so
connections.
interesting.
Yep.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
All right. So, do you want to go first? You want to give a strategy that works for you to keep this joy of learning going?
Yeah, I think one thing Manish and I have started to ask ourselves is this an experience I want to have?
Hmm.
Right? Because it's such when you think about it as less of a thing and
Yeah.
more of an experience, then it makes it richer, right?
Hmm.
So now it's becoming less transactional. And, it's like, do you want the experience of, I don't know, yes, you mentioned I went to this course learning to be a better public speaker. Yes, that's actually something I would really love to experience, is learning how to do that.
Yeah.
Um, do you want the experience of learning how to make gelato? Yeah, I would love that, right? So it if you want the experience, you're more likely to, to use your terms, and I guess Hugh Jackman's, right? Come alive.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good one. That's a really good one. One that I would probably share is, you know, having a larger filter at the top, a larger funnel for learning about what people are doing. And taking interest in the things that bring other people life, whether that
Mhm.
is learning a new language or learning how to make pizzas or smoking meat or whatever, and taking an interest and just having a large filter at the top. Like, what are people doing? Why are they doing that?
Yeah.
And then, you know, talk to them about it. And as you go through that filter, something's going to resonate with you. And you'll say, hey, I'd like to try that,
Yeah.
right? And then don't hold yourself back from trying it.
Mhm.
Find a way where you can be resourceful for you to try it with minimal investment or minimal time, and just proverbially dip your toes in the water.